but this is a webinar to help international students, pretty much all students, with just different ways to think about their time in terms of like managing their time more effectively. So we're just gonna wait for people to join the webinar and then we'll get properly started. All right, so I think I'm just gonna get started now. Thank you for anyone joining or anyone watching this recording after the fact. This is a webinar, a mini lecture of sorts, a call to arms basically for students to use their time in the most efficient way for them, right? And I understand that obviously parents are typically on their children's cases about time management, teachers as well. Everyone kind of knows about time management. We hear that term all the time. So it's just an opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into it, especially within the context of applying to university, which obviously means the context of like your high school life, right? So I'm going to highlight a few case studies of sorts. Talk about some different profiles that I've had the pleasure of kind of working with over the last few years, and then also just having a deeper conversation about it that hopefully will lead to some type of epiphany, if you will, or just an appreciation of time, right? Because that is one of the most valuable commodities in the world. Seems to go by very, very fast. Even in my own case, my kids are now 6 and 5 years old, and it's like, where has the time passed? So we can all appreciate that time does indeed move quickly. But why is time management important? Aside from the fact that it's something expected of us, I first and foremost feel it's the most relieving form of stress relief, right? Of stress management. The best way to kind of help a student, a young person with their mental health is to feel like they're in control of their time. Obviously, when we're younger, our parents pretty much dictate every minute of every day, or our teachers do. So once you start having a little bit more of that freedom of, that independence of what to do with your time, it's kind of understanding the personal battle that you're going to deal with, yourself, kind of figure out, okay, how much of this time I need to maximize and how much of this time can I just relax? How am I supposed to fill up all this time and still have a good time with my friends, still be social? How can I fit in a movie or a TV series if I'm supposed to be productive all the time? And again, that's not necessarily the point. So I'm going to frame it within the context of academia to help kids feel better about it, right? So we also know that time management is important because of the relationship that it has with your goals, right? If people set goals for themselves, which I believe every single person watching this webinar would have, whether it's academic goals of getting the best grades, right, or getting a high test score, or extracurricular goals of becoming the captain of your soccer team, or putting together a robot of sorts, right? Like it's going to take time to accomplish your goals. So obviously, the instant gratification aspect of completing a goal is now where we're kind of going after here. It's really being willing to put time into your interests and your activities. And again, time management is important because of kind of the career path that pretty much any young person will be on at some point in time. No pun intended. It's going to be expected that you are able to manage your time effectively, right? You're going to be paid for your time, ideally. So we want to make sure that you're happy in the way that you are spending your time, as if you do get to that point in your life. All right. So taking a look at the bigger picture, a conversation that I often have with students is, how much time do you actually have? Right? How much time does a student really have on a day-to-day basis? And again, for the sake of this, we're going to look at it from a daily perspective, a weekly perspective, and then kind of like the year-long timeline. So if we start with just day by day, how much time do students really have? In the morning, right? How much earlier do you wake up relative to when you have to wake up? So if your alarm is set at 7 a.m. because that's the time, that gives you enough time to get ready for school, have a breakfast, get to school in time, that's fine, obviously. But is there a possibility to kind of buy yourself more time by waking up an extra 30 minutes or an hour earlier? Okay, that's already the first thing to consider. Then after your morning, obviously you're at school for 7 or 8 hours or so. That time is pretty much filled up, although we will talk about co-curricular time as well in this chat. And co-curricular time is, time outside of class, but still on school campus. At least that's how I define it. And then we have after school time, 4 to 6 p.m., which is typically kind of extracurriculars. For some students, it's a commute. For other students, it might just be homework. And for some, it's just taking a break and relaxing and kind of like, letting the kind of the work rate of the day kind of subside and kind of relaxing for a little bit. And then there's another period, which is the evening, 6 to 10 p.m. Most people eat dinner around that time, within that time window. Dinner could take 30 minutes to an hour. Homework, obviously, give or take, but if we allocate 1 or 2 hours of homework, maybe some downtime or family time, that might be, again, 30 minutes to an hour. So really, if we're thinking about it, okay, 6 to 10 p.m., there's really only like one open hour there of like, okay, this is my own time, right? So if we think about just on a day-to-day basis, yes, most of your time is filled up, but there are still those windows, those pockets. And if you combine the weekdays and the weekends, and obviously on the weekends, you might have different commitments, but there's typically 15 or 20 hours of available time in a given week. Now, obviously, on the weekend, that's more ideal for, any activities that requires travel. Sometimes it's sports, right? You might have your matches or games on the weekend. For some students, it's independent projects. A coding project, you might spend time on that, or an artistic project or a film project. Those are the things where, okay, if I allocate time in the weekend for that, now I'm kind of like coming into my available time. And obviously, homework will also be a part of the picture. So if we say that there's 15 to 20 hours available on the weekend, and again, based on that breakdown of, 4 to 6 p.m. after school is open, 1 hour in the evening. So we'll say 3 hours available on the weekday. It's about 35 hours a week on average that can be filled. Okay, 35 hours a week. Funny enough, 35 hours is typically considered the usual work week in terms of the career terms, but 35 hours for usually an average 14 to 18-year-old, that's how much time they can fill up in their week. I'm not saying you need to fill up all 35 hours, right? That is not the point of this webinar. However, hearing, oh, I have homework, I don't have time to do anything because I have so much homework. No one has 35 hours of homework a week, right? Not even students at the most rigorous, most competitive schools have 35 hours of homework a week, and that is a good thing. Some people might have responsibilities, which again, you should take care of. But realistically, the things that don't count are, I have to, I would say like, get ready for school, or I have to, actually working out does count. But again, things like that don't, for this purpose, might not count as much. Things that do count though, anything that's considered academic enrichment, right? So if I do an online course that some people say for the summer, if I do that throughout the year, that counts. That's a very productive way to use that time, and that counts as an extracurricular. But even religious and family responsibilities do count. A lot of our students have younger siblings where the parents might work, so they're responsible for them, after school, making sure that they get home safe, making sure that they eat a snack, and that obviously bites into your time. Religious commitments, whether you're going to a church or a temple, synagogue, 1 to multiple times a week, that's something that you're going to be doing regularly. That counts as well. That is something that can be factored into what I call the activities list, right? Well, anyone calls the activities list in the Common App. So, those things are good uses of your time. And the last part, after the kind of the weekly breakdown, is the holidays. Now, holidays, you obviously have about 12 weeks off of school throughout the year. That's 60 to 80 days where you can find something that can move the needle. Obviously, always thinking of ways, or happy to talk about ways to kind of fill up that time, or activities that you can kind of commit to and start saying, okay, of those 12 weeks, I'm busy a couple of weeks out of the year. But realistically, even that, we're not saying, hey, you're at school for 40 weeks, you're off school for 12 weeks, the entire 52 weeks of the year, you have to be going max, max, max all the time, right? That's not the point. And I think when I share these profiles here in a second, you're going to kind of see that even for, what we call kind of the elite type of applicant, they still have different ways that they're managing their time. So I'm going to go through three case studies, three students who are now, I guess, in the latter stages of their university careers. So student one is future politician, right? That was kind of the profile. Again, you can list up to 10 activities on the Common App, and then it allows you to select it in either hours per week, how many hours per week you spend doing that activity, and how many weeks per year. If I use myself as an example, I literally played basketball every week of my teenage life. There wasn't a week where I did not play basketball. There's some weeks I played more, some weeks I played less. So I would take the average, and the average would probably be playing for a club and for school. That was about 5 to 6 practices, so 10 to 12 hours. And then you had 2 or 3 games a week. So again, another 4 to 6 hours. So it's anywhere from 14 to 18 hours of basketball is what I was doing on a weekly basis. Then if I would go to a camp, obviously that would, increase that average a little bit. But that was a pretty sizable commitment. It's comparable to some students who do robotics, and they're expected to complete kind of 15 hours of robotics a week. But in reality, most kids don't get to the double digits in terms of hours per week for any given activity. And most students don't go above 40 weeks in terms of their commitment throughout the year to that activity. So in this case, a student, future politician, debate was his number one thing. And that was 3 hours per week for 40 weeks, right? Then he had student council, 2 hours a week for 35 weeks. So already kind of like a little bit less than the debate, but he's already spending 5 hours kind of in that sphere, if you will. Then he had a campaign volunteering, because again, the political route, 6 hours a week, 45 weeks. A social justice program, which was 4 hours a week for 40 weeks. An internship, which was in the summer. So that was 35 weeks for 2 weeks. And that's the first time we've seen kind of all the previous ones. The first 4 activities were all 40, 40, 35, 45. So those were all weekly commitments. And now you have the internship. Then he'd volunteer again, one-on-one with a student outside of school, 3 hours per week, 40 weeks a year. And then he mentored at school another student, 2 hours per week, 35 weeks a year. He was a youth leader at synagogue, 3 hours a week, 45 weeks a year. And then a cappella at school for 3 hours a week, 40 weeks a year. And then the last activity was a career-oriented competition, which was about 7 hours a week, 40 weeks a year. So pretty sizable, but that was also a group project, so a little bit different. But if you add up all those hours, this was a pretty busy student, and he was filling up about 33 and a half hours a week over 9 activities, okay? And then he had the one summer activity, which is the internship. So even though he could have done something 9th grade summer, 10th grade summer, 11th grade summer, only one summer activity was actually highlighted in the application. The other 9 activities were more weekly commitments, and they were all kind of broken down to 3 or 4 hours each. So I kind of looked even deeper. It's like, okay, how many of these were at school? And indeed, 4 of those were at school. 1 was at church, 2 were outside of school, and then 1 was kind of like independent on his own, right, at home. So realistically, those hours, the fact that he was able to do 4 of them at school, those were the co-curricular ones, it wasn't really biting into that extra time, right, that additional time. He still had time to do his homework. Now that student, had a very successful college process, got into multiple schools, currently studied at a top 5 school. So it shows you like, okay, someone who is filling up their week, pretty on a regular basis, again, following their interests, they're going to have success, right? When we look at student 2, this one's more in the STEM world. And yeah, as a STEM leader, she was, most of her activities relate to STEM, but she also had some sports. The student 1 didn't have any sports, the student does. So if you look at her breakdown, I'm actually going to share this one on the screen. Give me one moment. Actually, no, I'll show the next one. So this student, she was a motivational speaker, 5 hours a week, but only 4 times a year, right? So she gave basically 4 talks at 4 different schools, or 1 talk at 4 different schools, 5 hours each in terms of the prep, and then obviously delivering the presentation. But that was her main activity because she like really enjoyed that a lot. Then the second one, and all those talks were related to young women in STEM. Second one was an Instagram page, which was self-guided, self-initiated. And that was her one. It's basically a way to say like, hey, I do this every single week. She basically would do an hour a day, give or take. That's probably a bit of a stretch, but 5 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. And then obviously the great thing about social media pages is that they can see not just your face or your voice or your interests, but they can see the consistency of which you post, right? So it's very kind of fact check, it's a fact checking ability. Then activity 3 was volunteering outside of school. She did that 2 hours a week for 40 weeks. Then there's Feminist Society at school, which is just 1 hour a week throughout the school year. Her club sports, track and field, about 4 hours a week, again, throughout the whole school year. And then now we have a couple of one-offs. So she had an internship for 2 weeks over the summer. And then she had a couple of speeches, award speeches that she gave, only 2 of them. So those counted for 2 hours, but she wanted to highlight them. Then activity 8 was volunteering once again as a mentor outside of school twice a week. And then she had soccer at school twice a week. So this student specifically was about 18 hours filled over 6 activities on a weekly basis, right? Student 1 was 33 hours over 9 activities. This student was 18 hours over 6 activities. And then she also had 1 or 2 summer activities, 1 internship, and then the Instagram page, which is consistent, which you can do year-long, school year-long, and over the summer, right? But again, a big drop between the 33.5 hours of the first student and the 18.5 hours of the second student. Yeah, this student also at a top 2 university, kind of going through that profile, right? So those activities, they made sense for her, right? A lot of them were aligned in terms of the STEM. A lot of them were aligned in terms of like public speaking and leadership. And it's kind of showed, okay, everything that you're telling us is kind of not just believable, but, of your own interest, right? It's your own path that you're kind of choosing here. Now, student 3 is the one where I'll share a quick screen share. One moment. Okay. So hopefully you can see this again. This is what it looks like now on the Common App. So you'll see again the hours per week here, weeks per year there. And again, this student kind of wanted to be an archaeologist, bit of an entrepreneur, been into international affairs. But you can see once again, debating was quite prominent. 5 hours a week, 40 weeks per year. And if you do the math, it's like, okay, that's like 200 hours of debating. The expectation is, oh, this student she's really strong in debating. That skill has developed over the course of 4 years here, right? 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. Then obviously you can put in the description of the activity. Then you see the volunteering as second, which was, charity involvement, 17 weeks per year. So that was mostly kind of based around holiday breaks with a little bit of continued involvement when at home, but mostly focused on the breaks. Then you see the first kind of school club, which is the Entrepreneurship Society that she founded, 4 hours a week, 40 weeks per year. And again, the school year is 40 weeks, right? So that's why it always makes sense to put 40. But the 4 hours per week, that's because she's a leader, right? When you're the leader of your own club or society, you kind of have the right to say, oh, I spend more time on that project. Then she has drama, which again, 2 hours per week, just consistently all 4 years. And obviously you're expected to grow within that skill. Debating as a member of the Public Speaking Society was just 1 year, right? Just in 10th grade, and then kind of moved on to other things, but it kind of fits into the rest of the profile. Again, another school activity. And then where this one gets really more interesting is that a lot of her other activities were not regularly weekly activities. They were more summer ones. So you can see the research here, the excavation, 56 hours per week for 1 week. So it's just like full on, 8 hours a day for a whole week. That's what she did. And again, we can assume that she learned a lot from that experience. A summer job as a waitress was another great experience. It's not really as tied as much to everything else, but it shows like a little bit of versatility, shows, people skills. And again, another summer commitment. Then she had the internship there for 16 hours a week, 3 weeks a year, working at a hotel. Again, that ties into the previous waitressing, hostessing one, just like another job at the hotel. Again, client relations, learning all those kind of skills. Then you have the volunteer fundraising for the Red Cross, which was just 8 weeks a year for 2 hours a week. And last but not least, the painting, drawing, kind of the creative expression, 2 hours a week throughout the year. So this student, if you add things up, which I've done, was about 15 hours per week filled on a weekly basis over 5 activities, and then 5 summer activities, right? So we have one student, the first one, student 1, 9 weekly activities, 1 summer activity. Student 2, 18 hours over 6 activities, 1 or 2 summer activities. And then this one, 15 hours over 5 activities on a weekly basis, and then 5 summer activities. So there's no perfect formula. And again, there's another student that got into some phenomenal schools. I believe she's at Oxford now, of all places. But it just shows that there's a lot of variety in terms of how kids spend their time. Some kids spend more time during the week. Student 3, the assumption there was like, okay, you spend more time over the summer, which frees up some time during the school year. Their grades were very, very impressive, right? This is a student who took 5 A levels and an EPQ as well. So again, that was a way of saying, I am spending more time on my academics. Then when my time frees up over the summer, that's when I do the things that I really, really enjoy. And that's when I pursue my passions. And again, that's her case, that's her path. And it made sense for her. She was able to kind of, articulate all those choices in her essays. And that's why she had a successful kind of process, right? So again, those were just to highlight a little bit the different things people do. Granted, a couple of them were on the debating front. Only one of them had sports, but obviously a lot of students do sports. But I think the main takeaway for me that I would want to share is if you can find 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, 2 to 5 ways to spend time at school, right? Monday lunchtime and Thursday lunchtime, co-curriculars, maybe after school, the 3:30 to 4:15 type of activity, that can go a long way. Not every school offers, the range of clubs that another school might. All right, well, be a leader, be willing to initiate a club, be willing to kind of see where it goes. Don't be afraid to kind of commit to something. And then that's going to almost require you to spend a, reasonable amount of time building up that activity inside of school. And then, in terms of that window outside of school, it's not a Monday through Friday, every single day you have to be doing something from 4 to 6 p.m. to fill that up. You noticed some of these kids save more time, for homework or for test prep, things of that nature. But it's making sure that you're not doing I come home from school, drop my bag off, do my work at some point, and that's good enough, right? If I just do my homework every day, that's good enough. It's not going to be enough, right? It's not going to be enough. You have to be willing to kind of find that interest that you're going to continue to, especially if you can do it for years and years, cultivate, right? That's going to add to your own just general intrigue, not just as an applicant, but as a young person. Okay, so that's for the case studies. And then I think for the last part, it's kind of being more practical. Some of these tips are probably very, very obvious or have been, repeated numerous times, but, setting SMART goals, that's the first way to be a better time manager, right? Planning ahead and being specific with, okay, this week I have academically these projects to do. And, I always say, try to avoid multitasking when it comes to academics and trying to say, I'm going to do 2 or 3 things at once. There's an ABC method that's very, very popular for time management where you list out all your tasks, right? You create a to-do list, you create a goals list, short-term goals, long-term goals, but the weekly or daily to-do list is very key. And obviously we've been doing that since we were kids in writing in our homework journal. Hey, this is my homework assignment. For some schools, they're available online now, but it's understanding, okay, based on my assignments, I give this an A, which is like, I have to do this right away, right? This is like immediate sense of urgency. Then a B was, okay, this is important, but it's a little bit less urgent. So it would be nice to complete it today. It would be nice to finish this task today. And if I do that, that's the reward factor, right? It feels great to finish things ahead of time, right? Again, it shows that you're basically beating time in that sense. So, making something, maybe my English essay isn't due till next week. Well, it's like, all right, I can still work on that now. If I get it done today, then that saves me a whole week of having to like wait and worry about it. Okay. And then C is, okay, this can reasonably be pushed to later. If I finish it now, I'm just really, really ahead. But even pushing it a day is not going to add more stress to me, right? The more we push things on, the more we procrastinate, which is a term I'll dive into a little bit more. That's when the stress starts to mount up a little bit. The more we're able to kind of do a little tick box exercise of like completing tasks, that is rewarding. It's an uplifting feeling for anyone, whether it's like, completing any type of task that creates a positive habit, from cleaning your room to making your bed to making breakfast, or, finishing homework. Those are all things that we do on a regular basis that, a little kick of dopamine or serotonin kind of gets released when you do those things, right? So make sure that we're able to, complete those tasks and enjoy the process of completing tasks. When you're younger, maybe you do it for someone else, you do it to get, a person of authority kind of off your back a little bit. Do it for yourself, right? Learn to appreciate doing it for yourself. It'll go a long way down the road. And then you can also reward yourself by taking breaks. The Pomodoro Technique is something that my colleague Niall introduced to me a long time ago, where you work for 20 minutes, very clear kind of specific tasks, and then you take 20 minutes off. Or you work for 30 minutes, take 30 minutes off, right? And then maybe you do 30 minutes on, 30 off, 30 on, 30 off. And it's, yes, 2 hours have passed, but within those 2 hours, you've gotten an hour of work done, and you've also had an hour to relax. And, you don't feel guilty for relaxing, and you also feel the sense of reward for getting things done, right? So that's another way to think about it. There's ABC method, there's Pomodoro technique. And the last thing is kind of understanding procrastination is human nature, right? It's not necessarily feeling a need to put yourself down and beat yourself up for procrastinating. It's just making sure that you don't let it become a habit or a defining trait, right? It should be viewed as a temporary lack of skill. That's the way I look at procrastinating. It shouldn't be like, oh, did you do your homework? Well, no, I'm a procrastinator. So like, therefore I don't have to do it at the same time as everyone else, because that's just my habit. I'm used to putting things off, waiting for the sense of urgency, therefore the stress to increase, and then I'll tackle it. Even though we know that that's not like the best way forward, right? So just getting into the habit of not even calling yourself a procrastinator. No one should say that. You shouldn't say I'm a procrastinator. You should say, I show signs of procrastination, but I'm working on it. If anything, I'm becoming a better time manager, right? A more efficient time manager. That's how we want to kind of start viewing ourselves. And again, within the context of the admissions process, it'll kind of help you at every stage, right? It'll help you figure out, well, which activities should I prioritize, right? Which activities should I spend the most time doing? Is that helping me with my own growth? How much is it connecting to my main dot, right? My main passion or my main academic pursuits? How does the time I spend at school relate to the time I spend outside of school, relate to the time that I spend, on my own, right? If those realms kind of overlap, if you can create a Venn diagram of time through those activities, you'll probably be pretty successful in this process, right? Second part of the time management is the actual process itself of applying and filling out applications and doing the research for schools. Obviously writing essays for over the summer of 11th grade or year 12. Those are all things that we're going to help you with and make sure that you are dedicating time to those things. But also feeling like, all right, I'm ready for that, right? I'm not worried about I don't want to say countless, but it's going to take dozens of hours to put in an application that you feel very, very proud of. So it's like, all right, I want to make sure that the hours that goes into that are worthwhile, that I'm not kind of like twirling my thumbs or, staring at the screen and then I say, oh, I spent time doing it. No, it's like doing it in a productive way, right? We're always trying to increase efficiency. There's a couple of apps as well for those that are, maybe more digitally focused and want to have like, little reminders. So the two that I think are most popular, as you may know, I use Calendly for my scheduling. That's not really going to help a high school student. But Todoist, right? Todoist is supposed to be a good one. And then Remember the Milk, which is a hilarious name for an app, but that's a popular one. You can use it across different platforms. It helps set reminders, helps kind of with, again, task completion. So check those two out, Todoist, Remember the Milk, see if they can kind of work for you. Some people are just very traditional, just have a normal journal, a daily journal, and they write things in there. Some people might just write in the notes app on their phone, whatever works for you, but just taking ownership of your time will lead to feeling, a stronger sense of independence over the coming years, right? And it's all in preparation for, obviously, I've probably spoken to many about this. At university, you have so much more time, right? You pick when your classes start. So if you choose to have classes only in the afternoons, you can do that. I'm not encouraging you to do that, but you can theoretically do that. If you want to have days where you have 3 classes so that the next day you only have 1 class, you can do that, right? It's just understanding that you're going to be the one scheduling, structuring your time, picking exactly when the times are the classes are meeting, picking when the discussion sections are at night. So I always tell kids, you have to be ready for that all of a sudden huge availability of time that falls into your lap in college. Obviously, you've done a lot of work to get there. And then once you're there, again, you want to make sure that you're using your time wisely, right? You want to make sure that you're joining the right clubs and organizations. Maybe you're getting involved in, new intellectual pursuits. Maybe you are a humanities student and you're starting to get into sciences and you want to go to visit labs, right? Maybe you want to find career opportunities. So you go to the career center and, conduct interviews and work on internships and things of that nature. Maybe you want to support the school sports teams and you have a roommate who plays, field hockey and you want to go see her play. So again, there's different ways to kind of use your time when you're in college, but I always see kids who kind of like, what do I do now, right? So we want to start thinking about this ahead of time, so that, again, you can just feel really, really good about the way that you're spending that time and really trying to be as productive and happy as possible. Okay. All right. If anyone has any questions or thoughts to share, please feel free to write into the chat or the Q&A now. I'll wait probably a minute or so. If no one does so, though, I'll obviously tell people that that's the end of the webinar, but please do feel free to ask any questions. See a few people still here in the attendance list. And for most of you on this call, obviously happy to follow up in terms of how this can be implemented or how it relates more to you personally, right? That's what I'm here for, obviously, but I just wanted to take a time to take a step back and look at the overall picture, share with multiple people, share these profiles and kind of give people a better, hopefully a sense of comfort. Like, oh, okay, even kids who, in this case, not afraid to say it, got into Stanford or got into UChicago and schools of that, like I said, Oxford, those students, one student 33 hours a week, one student 18 hours a week, one student 15 hours a week, right? So there's so much range there, and understanding that, you can almost do what you want with your time as long as you're able to kind of explain it in an appropriate way.